In this video, we are going to talk about question related to social justice and Indian society. Now, what does the question say? COVID-19 pandemic has caused extraordinary hardship to all sections of the society. However, the socio-economic burden has been much more on the vulnerable sections of the society. What efforts have been made by the central and state governments to address the problems faced by migrant workers? Also, give suitable suggestions on what more can be done to address them. So, that is the question that we have. Now, first of all, what are we going to be talking about in this video? We're going to understand why particular questions are chosen. So, why have we chosen this question in order to put that in the test? And we're going to take a look at the themes, then how to understand the demands of the question, and how to make a sample answer for this question. And then we'll be able to review whether we've done a decent job. Okay. Now, why this question in particular? Well, if we look at the syllabus, well, the syllabus in GS Paper 2 Social Justice says one of the sentences is government policies and interventions for development in various sectors and issues arising out of their design and implementation. And then it also says welfare schemes for the vulnerable sections of the population by the center and the states. So this question clearly is a part of where the syllabus is talking about vulnerable sections and welfare schemes. Now, let us take a look at a similar theme-based question from the previous years. This question says there is a growing divergence in the relationship between poverty and hunger in India. The shrinking of social expenditure by the government is forcing the poor to spend more on non-food essential items, squeezing their food budget. Elucidate. So here in this question, again the question has been talking about the theme of poverty and the theme of hunger, and how with progress we are facing new kinds of hardships in order to address poverty and hunger together, right, in an evolving situation. Now, why this question? Why have we framed this question right now? So, on account of the extraordinary situation, that COVID-19 has created in the current scenario, as we are all aware, that extraordinary hardships have been caused to the migrant populations. We've seen all about that, covered in the news media, both conventional and social media. And there's been a lot of criticism as well. And the government, on its own part, has actually taken a lot of steps to do things, yet still, obviously, maybe not enough has been done. The Prime Minister of India publicly apologized to migrants who suffered immensely. Right. So it grabbed a lot of media attention, has also been one of the most burning issues of the present time, the most vulnerable sections. So obviously it is something that can be expected. Now, how do we decode the question? Well, first of all, we read the question multiple times so that we understand the demands of the question. We identify the keywords. What that means is we want to understand what are the directive words, what are the content words, what are the limiting phrases or words. We want to identify the subparts. So this question says that you are to mention or give an account of the efforts made, things that have been done, the efforts made by the central and state governments. Now, this efforts made obviously could be something far and wide. So this efforts made could alternatively have been substituted for a word which could have said what are the policy directions that have been taken, or what are the executive actions that have been taken, or what are the legislative actions that have been taken, but it simply says efforts made. What that means is that you could cover all of it. You could talk about policies and legislative means, and you could talk about the already existing ones and the new steps that are being taken. So existing institutional mechanisms, how they are being exercised, you can talk about that, and you can talk about if whether some new kind of schemes or new kind of institutional mechanisms are sought to be created, or the existing ones modified in order to suit the needs of the current demand. Then it says by the central and state governments, rather than just simply saying the government or the central government, so that we could also look at the perspective of the state governments. This obviously could be the case on account of the fact that the primary responsibility in many cases lies with the state government. Right? Now, it also says what could be more things that can be done. What are your suitable suggestions? This is also a pretty thought-provoking idea, because it is often very easy to criticize, right, what the government has been doing, but what do you think more can be done in a structural way, right? So that is what the question asks of you. Now, what is it that we're looking at in the question? How do we structure it? The introduction says highlight, so that's what we're going to be writing down broadly. That's what we should be keeping in our mind as to how to write the answer. So in the introduction, we're going to say highlight how COVID-19 pandemic has caused extraordinary hardship to the vulnerable sections, including migrant workers. Maybe if you can give some numbers, it'll be a good idea. The body says that we're going to write down that we're going to list initiatives that have been taken by both the central and state governments, and then subsequently after that, we're going to write down more things that could possibly be done. The conclusion is going to be on the general line of the fact that, well, there's been a lot of extraordinary situations created, and migrant workers being the most vulnerable sections, their welfare ensures also the general and larger welfare of all of society, right, in the theme of inclusive growth and development. Now, how do we answer the question? Let us look at the introduction that we've written for ourselves. The burdens of COVID-19 pandemic due to loss of livelihood, healthcare expenditure, and social discrimination, amongst others, have come disproportionately on the vulnerable sections. Migrant workers have lost their jobs, place of living, and lack adequate social security. Now, coming over to the body, we're going to talk about the efforts that have been made from the central government first. Now, the central government has permitted the states to utilize the state disaster response funds for setting up shelters for migrants, for providing them with food, which obviously is the most important immediate need of the hour. For when we're talking about the efforts, you could be thinking about what needs to be done short term, immediate relief measures, and then what is short term to medium term. For example, short term, you could be thinking about setting up shelters, providing food, ensuring that there is security in conditions where extraordinary vulnerability is created. But then you would also have to talk about jobs. You would also have to talk about creating income, right? So that is kind of short term to medium term. So uh, releasing rupees 11,000 crores of center's contribution in advance to the SDRF, so that states have that necessary funding available to them, because kind of everybody's crunched for money as of yet. Now, allocation of an additional rupees 40,000 crores has been done under MG Narega, so that jobs could be created and more work days of employment could be created, and people who are going back to these villages, right, who have been able to do that, that they could maybe find a job and support themselves. Now, district-wise skill mapping is being done to assess the availability of skilled as well as unskilled laborers. This is to say, skill mapping means that we need to understand what are the skill deficits in an area. I mean, what are the industries? What kind of people do they require with what level of skill set, right? what do they require, what is the total demand, and maybe how the demand is going to be increasing in the immediate future, and which are the people living in that area now, especially because there are a lot of more migrants returning home who were skilled and maybe working in different industries. What is their current skill set? So we can appropriately match it. We can make an effective plan and we can get working on that. Right. Well, states have been advised to use the Jal Jeevan mission, right, from the Jal Jeevan Ministry, right, from the Jal Jeevan mission and other flagship programs for employment generation. Obviously, that would be multi-pronged. The effects, we could create infrastructure, right, which is going to play into multiple other things, meaning obviously fulfilling essential requirements, but also creating more jobs and creating an enabling environment for other things to happen. For example, self-employment to be generated, right? Then finalizing the labor code on social security and welfare to address social security concerns of migrants. So we're working on legislative means, how that could be done so that there's a legal guarantee to it, so that we could have a more uniform, structured framework of how we can move ahead on this direction. Obviously, it kind of is something of a short to medium term, right? Because it would take at least months to actually get passed and then implemented on the ground uniformly. So we're thinking about it as a short to medium term thing. Now, then we say rolling out one nation, one ration card scheme. The thing is that the bulk of the migrants, on account of the fact that they've been moving around a lot, are not being covered under the welfare programs of various different state governments. Often because they're not registered in one area, or where they're registered, they're not living there. And we lack really the portability in the welfare system networking that we have in India. I mean, that we actually do not have in India, which is a major loophole in how the welfare system works. And getting this one nation, one ration card scheme could be a significant step towards ensuring that we could have portability of the welfare network and schemes. Right? Now, labor code on social security is being finalized to address social security concerns of migrants. We actually just talked about that, in fact. So we repeated that, I think. And launching the Garib Kalyan Rozgar Abhiyan. Right. So this Garib Kalyan Rozgar Abhiyan is about, providing jobs for 125 days to people returning migrants in these 6 different states, right? Like UP and Bihar and Rajasthan and Odisha and Jharkhand, right? So, and Madhya Pradesh. So in these states, we are going to provide jobs to migrants who've been returning for 125 days, who are going to be building infrastructure, right? So it is going to have multi-pronged effects again. So that's kind of an immediate relief step. These are the states where there's a bulk of the migrants returning, right? So those are steps that have been taken by the central government. But for the state government, well, UP has established a migrant commission. I mean, is establishing a migrant commission to set up the map skills of workers who have returned, right? Rajasthan has started collecting data of both skilled and unskilled workers to be made available to factory owners. And Madhya Pradesh has started the Shram Siddhi Abhiyan to provide work to every unskilled worker in the rural area. Well, these are some good initiatives, right, from different state governments. And then we come to the ending part of the body of the answer, which is what could we do more? So we could work on reorientation of the working of the Construction Workers Welfare Board. See, the construction industry is a big employer in every state for workers. And when we kind of reorient this Construction Workers Welfare Board, it could be much more of a sustained, like an organized way in how we are dealing with the issue, rather than simply, doing sporadic things without effective administrative structures. A comprehensive database of migrant workers has been, could be created across India. And obviously, we could start with talking about MG Narega workers, and there's been a significant hike in people who've been enrolling in MG Narega, especially seasonally. In this case, right now on the COVID scenario, right, and we could start probably creating that data bank from there, and then build upon. So Well, the thing is that a lot of people would also possibly want to suggest that we could start working on like the transportation systems, right? Because a lot of migrant workers have been stranded, right? But considering the fact that we're preparing for a question which is multiple months down the line, right? Transportation, while in the first 2 to maybe even 3 months, immediately after the lockdown, was a major issue. A bulk of the people are now wanting to return to the cities to find employment. So we're not really bringing out the transportation angle right now on the further reforms needed. Then the conclusion: with nearly 454 million migrants, according to the census 2011 in India, welfare of migrant workers is essential for the larger welfare of society itself. This is like the idea of where we talk about inclusive growth or sarvodaya through antodaya, right? Sarvodaya means like the growth and development of everybody, and antodaya is focusing on the most vulnerable sections of society. So that's like the vision of sarvodaya through antodaya, working for the welfare of the most vulnerable migrant sections as of now. And then, uh, well, let us review the answer that we've just created. Now, was the answer relevant? We've already discussed that. What are the kind of keywords that you have used here? Words such as Shram Siddhi Abhiyan, the State Disaster Response Force, MG Narega, Jal Jeevan Abhiyan, Garib Kalyan Rozgar Abhiyan. These are certain specific catchwords which have given some kind of more specificity and groundedness to your answer there. And then, well, we've discussed the intro, body, and conclusion. The presentation has to have headings and point and subpoint approach. And then we've looked at the language and grammar. What are the keywords? What are the connecting words? And whether sentences in which they've been framed, they effectively communicate what you're actually trying to say, right? Are there we tend to avoid absolutist sentences. We tend to avoid sentences which do not appropriately indicate the reasoning assertion link, right? Anyway, so the word limit has approximately been achieved, and that kind of summarizes this answer.